Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a fascinating clinical case study on the hidden burdens of a highly active mind. Today, we venture beyond the facade of everyday intellect to peer into the complex, often restless machinery of the modern thinker. All right, let's drop the broadcaster voice for a second. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking some truly fascinating psychology that completely flips a very common script on its head. There's this pervasive myth out there. People tend to think that being highly intelligent just automatically makes life easier. That if you're smart, you've just got it all figured out, right? But the psychology we're looking at today shows us something completely different. It shows that a powerful mind is actually a lot like a massive industrial machine. It's incredibly capable, yes, but it is heavy, it requires constant maintenance, and crucially, it rarely rests. If you've ever felt mentally exhausted, misunderstood, or just distinctly different from the crowd, well, the 5 psychological struggles we're about to unpack will explain exactly why. Okay, let's dive right into this. Struggle number 1 is the sheer burden of overthinking. Highly intelligent people don't just experience an event and move on. They run constant mental simulations about it. Their brains immediately fire up these elaborate what-if scenarios. What if this happens instead of that? What if I said the wrong thing? It's just a relentless cascade of possibilities. Research points to a concept called higher analytical processing. Now, the clinical trade-off of this mental machinery is super fascinating. On the one hand, this cognitive ability is totally linked to making much better decisions. But on the other hand, superior reasoning comes at a really steep price. It results in anxiety, lying awake replaying conversations from 3 days ago, and a frustrating inability to just find the off switch. It's literally the cost of severe mental exhaustion. Moving right along to our second struggle, we find a profound craving for deep connection. Highly intelligent individuals frequently feel incredibly isolated, even in a totally crowded room. Why? Because they aren't looking for small talk about the weather. They crave conversations that are abstract and intensely layered. Without that depth, they really struggle to feel truly understood by the people around them. Psychology tells us this leads to selective socializing, and what we really need to take away from this is a massive reframe of their behavior. Their silence or withdrawal in group settings absolutely does not mean they're antisocial or snobby. It's a psychological preference. They simply require depth to feel a real connection, which means they naturally filter for fewer, highly meaningful relationships. And yeah, while this is a fantastic filter for quality, it can occasionally lead to acute feelings of loneliness. Struggle number 3 is paralyzing perfectionism. High intelligence is frequently linked with incredibly high internal standards. Because a highly intelligent person can clearly visualize the absolute ideal way a task should be done, anything that falls short of that, even perfectly acceptable, totally average results, feels incredibly frustrating. This isn't just about being neat. It often mutates into harsh self-criticism and a deep-seated fear of failure. Which brings us to struggles 4 and 5, existential dread and constant awareness. Advanced reasoning really ramps up abstract thinking. While most people are happily focused on their daily routines, the high-level thinker is constantly wrestling with massive questions about purpose, meaning, and mortality, triggering heavy existential anxiety. Combine that with a brain that notices absolutely everything: patterns, subtle flaws, everyday injustices, inefficiencies, and man, it's overwhelming. They see exactly what everyone else misses. But this constant hyper-awareness is exhausting, and it's the exact reason why they sometimes seem a little too intense to the average person. So, if the machine is this heavy and runs this hot, how do they keep it from breaking down? How do they manage the heavy lifting? Well, high-level thinking isn't just a genetic lottery. It is strongly shaped by habits. Let's transition into the specific, disciplined behaviors that regulate this mental machinery. Habits of the high IQ, regulating the machine. Habit number 1 is an absolute ultimate tool called metacognition, literally thinking about your own thoughts. Instead of blindly assuming they're right, they actively interrogate their own mind. Why do I believe this? What evidence actually supports it? Could I be biased? Psychologists note that this deliberate reflection on how decisions are made vastly improves reasoning tasks because it directly cuts down on 2 massive cognitive errors: confirmation bias and overconfidence. And this brilliantly illustrates the second habit, choosing mental challenge over comfort. Studies on learning show that the brain actually strengthens when it struggles. High-level thinkers don't just passively consume easy content. They deliberately seek out complex material. They are perfectly willing to just sit with confusion and chew on really difficult ideas, knowing that this desirable difficulty is literal weight training for their brain. Rounding out the architecture of clear thought are these three clinical habits. First up, they pause before reacting. Delaying emotional reactions allows logic to step in before impulse takes over. Second, cognitive flexibility. If new evidence proves them wrong, they don't fiercely protect their ego. They just update their beliefs. Adapting is a sign of strength, not weakness. Finally, they think in probabilities. You will rarely, if ever, hear a smart thinker use words like always or never. Behavioral science shows that judging the likelihood of an outcome, rather than demanding certainty, dramatically improves judgment and removes toxic black and white thinking.
Case study, the birthday anomaly.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how we can look at a highly relatable case study to see these traits in action. Have you ever noticed someone who treats their own birthday like it's just completely normal? No countdowns, no huge emotional buildup. To the outside world, it looks strangely simple, but the psychology behind it is fascinating. The core difference lies in how we process self-worth. Birthdays automatically force external attention. Messages, posts, all eyes on you. The external seeker totally thrives on this. But highly intelligent thinkers often lean toward being the internal validator. Psychology shows their sense of identity remains remarkably stable whether it's a massive milestone or just a regular Tuesday. Their existence simply doesn't require a public announcement to feel valued.
Furthermore, there is the intense stress of the spotlight. For some, the sudden, massive spike of attention and emotional intensity a birthday brings actually feels artificial, or worse, overwhelming. Research looking into introversion and social anxiety confirms that this sudden hyperfocus can actually activate acute stress instead of joy. Keeping it low-key is just a really practical way to manage that intense pressure. In some cases, treating the day like it doesn't matter is a clinical self-preservation tactic. The brain is incredibly adaptive. If an individual grew up experiencing inconsistent celebrations, limited resources, or forgotten dates, their brain learned that high expectations simply lead to disappointment. By deliberately lowering expectations and acting like the day's no big deal, they employ a protection mechanism to completely avoid the risk of emotional hurt. There is also a powerful rebellion against invisible rules going on here. Birthdays come loaded with social obligations. You must reply to everyone. You must perform gratitude. You must do something special. Highly intelligent people often value their autonomy above almost everything else. By resisting the societal pressure of a birthday routine, they retain absolute control over their own time and their own mental energy. So what do they do instead? Often, they use it as a day for intense private reflection. Rather than throwing a loud party, they turn their formidable mental machinery inward. They ask the heavy self-evaluation questions. Where am I in life? What really changed this year? What didn't? It's a day of quiet processing. Embracing your quiet mind. As we bring this explainer to a close, the takeaway from our birthday case study beautifully summarizes the high-level thinker. When they choose peace, when they choose to process quietly instead of loudly, it absolutely does not mean they don't care. It simply means they care privately. And so, we conclude our clinical observation of the modern intellect, a machine of profound depth, occasionally burdened by its own immense capacity. The evidence is presented, the patterns decoded. The only question that remains for you to ponder is this. Your mind rarely rests, but are you letting it work for you?